If the late Simon Thomas would have been living, he could tell me. I know somebody was milking cows or doing something up there. But to find out who, I got nowhere. I just kept running into a block wall. But that map, my granddaughter, Caitlin Ho, I said, I need a map of Springfield Township. The bottom part is Columbiana, and the very top is Colin Township, and the line on your right-hand side is Pennsylvania. She found it, she knew how to go get on the computer and go to the library and get a map. We took it and got it enlarged. My acquaintance that we do a lot of things together, travel and so forth. Susan Les Phillips here, she's the one that came up with the idea of putting the pins of everything there. So we're going to go down through those cards, and they're numbered. So afterwards, I'm leaving that here. That can be a part of the historical, and if you want it or whatever happens to it, but it needs to be updated. Now, if I'm going down through it, and you see something I'm making a mistake on, remember, I did become a Kohler, and down in life, you become hard of hearing. I'm very good at saying, what? So, if you think that you need to insert something for Wade, you can holler at me and get my attention. So we'll start up in the corner, and the first one is the dairy farms. How it has changed, and we're using the basis of 1962. Now you wonder how I come up with 62. Well, I'm using the last Wednesday of the month of May in 1962. They handed out some diplomas in Springfield at the old school. So I thought, well, that's a good place to use the basis. I would say that what I'm going to do in this presentation is try to do most of it in the first 10 years up until 73, 75, compared to what it is today. In the top left corner is the Gutterby farm. They milk cows. No cows today. The next one to the east is the Johnson farm, where the WKBN towers are. They milk cows. The late Tom Howard lived there and helped Carl Johnson milk cows in the morning, got on the school bus. The next one is the Molnars. Well, we all know the Molnar farm today they don't have any dairy cows, but they sure do have a bunch of peaches and sweet wine. On east is Simon Thomas, and that's the only one up here. Unfortunately, he was a classmate. I have some other classmates here today. One super guy, but one day he fell over with a massive heart attack. Now we'll go down onto Middletown Road, the Broomgarts. In 1962, Dick Sr. was still milking a few cows. They quit for a short period of time, and then when Junior came on the scene, that's when they milked a number of cows, put in the bulk tank and the pipeline milker and so forth. But also in 1962 is when the Petersburg Creamery said, and I think it was by the 1st of July, you had to have a bulk tank. No more cans. It had to be bulk milk. You know, the Kohlers built onto their milk house and made it big enough to hold a 250-gallon tank. Years later, we expanded it a little bit more to put a bigger one. And the last time, probably we should have quit milking then, but we did put a big tank in. Okay. the Moorjocks. In 1962, Grandpa Moorjock was milking cows. And that farm is right east of Baird Road on Gala Road. And he was milking cows. There's sheep there, feeding steers, and they do a real nice job of it. Charles III. On Gala Road, as I mentioned, Fred and Howard Kohler. Now we'll go over to the Fond du Lac, the Lake Club. Right south of the Lake Club was the Lida farm. Frank Lida, I'm told they milked some cows. Was it for their own use or did they ship it? They never had a bulk tank, I'm sure of that. So there was a herd of cows in there at one time. You come on the east side of Evans Lake, the haulers. They milk cows, they put a bulk tank in, shipped it to Petersburg. Probably mid-80s is when Lawrence Hauler passed away, and Chuck and the girls got rid of the cows, and Chuck came to work for me. Okay, we'll go down Springfield Road. There's a gap in there, but I can't find any record of anybody milking going on south on Springfield Road till we get to Zimbars. Zimbars milk cows, but I don't know if he milked cows. The first barn burnt. I do remember that, and he built the second barn. Did he milk when he built the second barn, or was he I know he worked at M Spring, but now you go right into Springfield. Guy Brown. Guy Brown milked a lot of cows. He had a loyal gentleman, George Conder. George graduated from high school and had been working for him before he worked the whole time for Guy Brown, and then when Bacon's took it over, he stayed with them until there wasn't any more cows than that. But there's no cows there. Going towards Petersburg, Paul McPherson. The ones of you that knew Dick McPherson, we would get on Dick that maybe you ought to change your shoes. Don't come to school with the shoes you had in the barn this morning. He would forget. He'd go in from the morning milking and he'd forget and he'd grab the wrong pair of shoes back on. That was a good joke. Mercer's on Waterford Road. Steve and Stan never milked cows. But John, when John came home from Ohio State, he and Channing at one time milked a lot of cows in that barn. And then John decided maybe he ought to go back to Ohio State. So that's when Channing quit milking cows, and then Steve and Stan got into the pork business, raising all. And it was probably at that point, one of the largest hog growers. It was the largest in Springfield Township, and I'm not too sure it was in the one or two of the top in the county. Ross Foster up on South Range Road. He and Mary Lou got married. He bought that farm. They started milking cows. I don't think they lived there a year, and the first barn burned. He rebuilt it and milked cows for a number of years. Okay. The only dairy farm still in Springfield Township. Started with Beanie, Jay and Gordy, and now Howie runs it. Howie's milking probably 50 cows, maybe more, I'm not sure. But when you go down through the list, And I know I missed some. But when you go down through the list on that, there's only one dairy farm in Springfield Township. And at one time, we had you had 18 that I'm talking about. I know that there was more. I think the farm back where Court and Leanne Warner lives, that gentleman milked at one time. So there's a handful of them out there. Let's move on to potato farms. Well, we all know that the Marsh grew a lot of potatoes. And one year, they broke the 200-acre mark. Kenny tells me it was 218 acres. You had Arthur Raymond and Roy Koch. I would put them as, on volume-wise, I would put them as probably number 2 next to the Barks. Carl Johnson, where he milked cows at one time, had an underground storage for potatoes. He also had probably 5 acres. Molnar's. How many people are in here ever knew that Ricky Molnar's dad grew 10 acres of potatoes a year? I remember as a kid, Cousin Ross and I'd go up there and pick potatoes. I think we got what, a nickel a bushel or something. Picking them up, you put your little tag, like the tags that went at the top of a gallon jug of milk. And you had a number, and you had some of those in your pocket. When you filled a bushel basket, you put that in, that's how they tallied it. Blind Rhodes, Frank's dad, he grew some potatoes. We all knew that Frank's mother, she hauled them into a 5th Street market. Probably she had the best potatoes of anybody in there. She was quite a lady. That is the ones that I have that grew potatoes. Yeah, the Kohlers did before 1936. There's a chicken house that won't be there long, but there's a chicken house on the Kohler farm with a basement. And that's where they would dump the potatoes through the cement floor and store the potatoes. Then fill 100-pound bags and carry them up the concrete steps. Boy, I was glad I was later in life. Strawberry growers. Roy Yeoman. If you wanted strawberries, you can go to Roy. Richmond Smith at the top of the hill on Unity Road, just about to South Range Road, going south on Unity Road. Clyde D. Rhodes again. You're going to have to answer that, Frank. Did he have pick your own, or did you kids have to pick them all?
He had kids to pick.
Okay.
He made sure he had enough.
The one that a week or so ago, Tom Kerr called me, the barber. Went to school with us. He had a question, and I said, well, I went kind of over this whole thing with him, picking his brain. He said, well, you missed one on strawberries. Ross Smith. And I said, Ross Smith. Here it's out here on 170, just out here after you go past Withers's. I guess up in there on the left back end. Ed Shaw grew strawberries earlier out in the front, but I guess this farm is somewhere, the property was in the back. Tom says, do you mean you didn't know Ross? I said, no, I did not know Ross. Those are the ones that I come up with who grow strawberries, but there's one more. Drumgards. Drumgards started, but they didn't back in that era where I was starting from 62 to 75. It was after that. Patty and Dick grew, and Dick didn't have anything to do with that. They grew a lot at one time. The next topic is machinery dealers. To think of it, in Springfield Township, in '62, we had 3 to 4 machinery dealers. Les Moore, right up over the factory. He sold all of her tractors. One of the best welders that you could ever have in that day and age. Ben Oldfield, going up the street just past the hardware on the right-hand side, sold Massey Ferguson's, not Massey Harris, Massey Ferguson's. Then you had Joe Snyder on Unity Road, north of Middletown Road on the right-hand side. The building's still there. He sold Massey Harris. And then last, Measles. To think that Measles sold Farm OHs, Farm OMs, Cubs. I have no idea what I saw here. I don't know when the last one, when was the last tractor sold? Yeah, no?
No, I don't know.
It was a long time
It was
ago.
more in the 40s, but I'm not sure.
But, you know, I mean, to think of it, Springfield Township had 4 machinery dealers and 3 of them right here in the metropolis of Petersburg.
That's more of those still there too.
Now, grain farmers, this is hard to put in, but if I use that date of 1975 and go backwards, some of these here probably didn't start producing grain, not to feed, but to sell. The first one, Wayne Bacon and his dad, Darrell. Wayne was growing corn before he got that diploma in 1963. He loved growing corn. He loved growing anything. The biggest one was Bart's, but they used all of it themselves to feed the turkeys and the chickens, because in that era there, that's when the Bart farm was expanding and going from 10,000 turkeys to on. The one that surprised you, if you knew him, was Kenny Smith. Kenny Smith started growing corn shortly after high school, and the people really didn't know it because he was going to college. But his grandfather said, sure, you can farm the farm. And Kenny started growing corn, and to start with, Wayne shelled it. Wayne was the first one in Springfield Township, besides the Barts. They converted a combine to combine corn before John Deere actually made a corn head for a combine. They had somebody machine a case head onto a John Deere combine. Dick Broomgard, I have to go to junior. Dick got into it, young Dick. He got a market that he used to come to Petersburg, go down the back way. He had a triaxle dump truck, and he'd get on the turnpike and not go through the terminal out here, he'd go through down there. And he'd even sneak off. But at one time, Dick Jr., he moved a lot of corn, but he started doing that soon as he got rid of the cows. That's when Dick started doing that. John Molnar, yeah, he was selling corn. Rick Sr., Rick Jr., growing a lot of corn today. I can't honestly tell you, sometime in the 70s, and I think the early 70s, when Doc bought the Sigurd farm, he and Brian grew a large operation Jerry Gutterby. There wasn't any cows, feeding a few steers, but he was farming some farms, and he was selling grain on the open market. Most of it back then, if you sold it locally, it went to ag land in Canfield. Like Dick, he was shipping it to Pennsylvania. Wayne was shipping high moisture corn, not even dry, semi-loads, down to Lancaster. He had worked out a deal down there, and it worked out great. Dan Schaefer. When Dan quit working for Barks, he started, now time-wise, 75 to in the early 80s. Cook Warner, Uncle Boy, Cork and I planted a lot of corn. And he started growing, and he wanted to grow some on his own, which he did. And that's when Doc had put the dryer in. That probably was the biggest thing in Springfield Township. The ones of us that didn't have a grain facility like my son has, Moore's had, Snyder's had. When the Snyders put that in, that just opened it up. You didn't truck corn from here to Canfield. You went to Baird Road. And Doc was great. When the Coates got rid of the chickens, Tom still had the acreage that he was planting corn. So he was marketing
That
corn.
sentence seems to be
He
cut
was
off
sitting in a
or
good
jumbled.
location.
Could you rephrase what you're trying to say about Tom and the coach?
Don't slur at that fun. The Tom sitting here, he could get on the turnpike. He could go east with no trouble. There was a market to ship corn east, like there is today. Going east, you go across Interstate 80, you go to the ethanol plant. Eggs and chickens. We all had a few chickens, still have a few chickens, even have a couple of turkeys. But there's two names that definitely, Barst being number one and Coates being number two. Bill Carrier, probably in the early 70s, built a chicken barn that would hold 5,000. Barst had chickens on 3 different farms, one in Poland, one on Calla Road, and at the main farm. Harry Carrier on Unity Road. Bill had the one on Calla. His dad had the barn that's still standing. They put different floors in it. I remember the time that there was too much chicken manure in the thing, and the second floor went to the first floor. That was a job that we had, digging that out. Produce. Felder's had to be number one. Harold Bacon, I forget which one of the Felder boys was, but was way older than Darrell. Darrell always told me he fired him 3 times in one day, and old man Felder hired him back. Darrell would go home, and Felder's dad would go and tell him to get back. There wasn't another farm in Springfield Township that had more international tractors. I forget, I think they had something like 13 cubs that they cultivated with. They grew a lot of cabbage. The second one goes back to Clyde U. Rhodes. Your dad, he grew a lot of produce. And your mother, I can still see your mother hauling it into the Vine Street Market. Vic Papira. I didn't think of that one until today. I drove across Middletown Road to go check on the flowers in the Zion Cemetery, and I'm driving up Middletown Road, and I go past that field that Boris had soybeans in, and I'm thinking, well, you dummy. Vic grew more green beans. He had green beans going to Pittsburgh, he had them going to Cleveland, to Pius Street. Yeah, your dad shipped a lot of green beans.
I know. He used to call me
And the old school teacher, Paul, he helped him a lot. The last one is Richmond Smith, again up on the hill at Unity Road and up above Kenny Smith's. Richmond produced a lot. That's a quick scenario. You can see Susan put that together. I come up with the names, so forth. She said, we've got to get a map made. I couldn't figure out where we was gonna find a map, and I bring it up to this young lady's attention, and she said, well, I'll get it at the library. I said, oh, okay, you get it at the library. Went to Office Max, blew it up. As I said before, it was hard to get information in that northeast corner of the township. I know, like the pizzas, did they ship milk? They had to have a couple cows for their own use. The Demonis on Baird Road north of us that the Cunnies bought. At one time, they had a 10-foot silo, and they would fill the silo. How many cows? I was young. They had cows. That's where I think that there's handfuls of herds, not big herds, half a dozen. I talked to Frank many times and tried to pick his brain. I go over and see Dick Broomgard. I try to go see him at least once every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's every week. When Patty told me that when her and Dick got married in 1964, her and her mother were still milking 7 cows on Kibler Road right across the county line. I said, Patty, I didn't know you guys milked cows. And she said, yeah. When we got married, there were 7 cows there. The township sure has changed since that day in 1962. When you look at the acreage, there isn't any more being farmed, being used for other things. You don't need to worry. There's a lot of people worrying about farms putting up solar panels. I don't think the next generation of Kohlers that now control it, no, there ain't gonna be solar panels. I won't say it won't be houses. I can't stop it. I sold real estate off. The bar sold a lot of real estate off. It's the way the world turns. But there sure is a lot of things. I know, Mary, you wanted me to talk about the Kohler farm. That can be another day. That'll take longer than with this presentation. To think when great-grandfather Fred owned both sides of Baird Road, he gave one farm to Henry and one to Levi. And Henry had a son, Mark, and he had 2 sons, Mark Jr. and Ross. On the west side, Levi had a Had two sons, Fred and Howard. Fred had no sons. Howard was, I guess you could say, blessed with me. Sometimes I wonder if that's the word to use. And I have two sons and two daughters. The ones of you that don't know it, I don't own any of it today. It was time to, at my age, it was time to pass it on to the next generation. Roy farms quite a number of more acres than I ever did. Let's talk about tractors. In 1965, 66, John Deere come out with a tractor called the John Deere 4020, probably the hottest tractor that John Deere ever produced. Mars got one for the spring, and before the fall was over, they had the second one ordered, and in a 365 days, they had bought two. Don said once, he said, you know, we should have filled the whole barn full of them things. We thought that was really something. They had 100 horsepower. Who in the world would ever believe today we'd have tractors in Springfield Township, not one or two, 350 horsepower apiece. Two of them on the Kohler farm, three of them on the Molnar farm. I'm not sure if two or three at the Snyder's. I'm not too sure if two or three, 350 at the Bacon farm. And there has to be at least three, if not four, at the Bark farm. And we thought we were big time farmers pulling 5-bottom plows with a 4020. We all had 5-bottom plows and Wayne Bacon, he had to buy a 4320 and pull 6. Then the next thing you know, he bought an articulator and bought a 7-bottom plow. That was his limit. But you know what I mean? Today, I can remember discing with an 8-foot wide disc. And today you know, I can run it, but I can hit trees too with it, 32-foot wide. Yeah, it's completely different. So that's my opinion of how Springfield Township and agriculture has changed. To think, you know, all the chickens we had, turkeys, how the cattle or the cow business, that's the one that really didn't think about it until you made the list. And, any questions? Yes.
When did the house start farming?
The what? The big house.
How? George.
Oh, George Howe. Yeah. George graduated sometime from Ohio State in the 70s. Came home with his degree from Ohio State. Utilized it. Grew probably, he was probably up to 200 acres of corn. When beans came on, he got into beans. The rest of us are all planting 15-inch rows, 7-inch rows. George sees these, he saw these people out in Western Ohio planting 30-inch rows. George was the only one to his untimely death last year. Boy, what a loss we got there. But he's planting 30-inch rows of bushy bean. George was getting yields as good as we were with 15-inch rows. Had to give him credit. Kathy and Katie, they're running the farm, and she got good-looking beans, good-looking corn, which we're all fortunate this year with the rains we've been getting in the heat units. We don't need any more storms like last night. Change the subject a little bit. If they say, no, that was just a blast of air, no. If you go to the Kohler farm today, at the produce stand and look at the sweet corn that the wind pushed leaning, it's leaning to the north. But about 2 hours ago, I got on the mule and I jockeyed up to the other end of the Fred's farm next to house. It's leaning to the south. And that isn't over a half mile apart. It's right at a half mile. Now, some meteorologist comes out and says, well, that was whatever you call a blast. No, that thing was going around. Because there's a perfect example. I went and looked at the sweet corn, and it's headed right towards West Reserve Road. And I go to, up on the field, it's 180 degrees the other way, but I go back on West Reserve Road, and the trees are leaning to the south. Now, that's amazing on a blast. So, any other questions? Somebody had their hand up.
I did. Do you know who owned the land that was on Route 170, but it was Route 90 back then? Because I grew up on that land, and Ross Foster had to field his farm across the way where, before Olin's bought that farm and built South Range Lake. We don't know who owned that property. I do know that my dad used to pay rent to Clarence and Agnes Schmolder. Does that ring a bell?
You're talking about the one just south of Brad Stowey?
Yes.
Okay. It's got oats in it right now.
Oh.
We had farmed it. I started farming that, who knows, early 80s, late 70s. And my son's been farming it.
Now he loved
One of Ross Foster's,
Charlie, I think.
one of the boys, not Charlie, I don't know. One of the girls married a boy up at not Sakeley, the one right east on 224.
Cindy Foster was her name.
Yeah, they just bought it.
Oh.
Tom and Butch and Renee. They're all three of them. Louis bought it, and I would imagine, Louis and Bill.
Okay.
And I would imagine your dad rented it from Louis and Bill. And back then,
Oh, because that
I
was
can't tell you who owned that farm.
before that, okay. Because,
That's one I can't tell you.
okay, this would be like between 1950 and 1958,
Yeah.
so,
At one point, Dave Sugar bought a chunk of it, I think.
oh, okay.
And, yeah. Yeah, Frank.
So where's agriculture headed in Springfield Township in the next 10 years?
I better take a swallow here. Well, the next generation's coming on. But I mentioned the Lydas. The younger generation, and I did miss John Lyda. John started milking cows probably in the 70s sometime on Middletown Road. And then he has two boys, and I think they both have engineering degrees. They farm over there, and they bought a farm on Struthers Road up there across from Steve Callis. Good boys. If you take I'm not going to mention names, but if you take the 5 largest operations in grain farming in Springfield Township, I think 3 of them will be gone in 10 years. I'll go one step further. Molnar's will still be selling tomatoes and sweet corn. I think, I'm sure that the one on Baird Road, south of the turnpike, with all the grain bins and the elevator legs, that'll still be a farm. The other three, acreage-wise, yeah. They're all in 1,000 acres or more, okay. To answer it, to be honest, I think there'll be 3 of them. There'll be 100-acre farms, 200-acre farms, but will there be 5,000-acre plus based in Springfield Township? The 3 other ones, there's no juniors. And that, you know what I mean? Yeah, Jim.
I just read an article here about a month ago. In the turn of the century, from 1800 to 1900, 90% of the workforce in the United States was on farms. It was hard for me to realize that was a fact at that time.
Yeah. And you go out in the heart of agriculture in Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, the Dakotas. It's corporate farms. There's too many farms go along. And the next generation are girls. Look at the Kohler family. What do we got? 8 girls and 1 boy. I think. You know what I mean? This is happening. If you look at the biggest farm operation in Mahoney County, Marty's, out on 534. That's a good question where Marty's are gonna be at in another 10 years even. Kevin and his cousin, the younger generation, you got five brothers running that. They're milking 1,300 cows, probably farming 3,000 acres. And it takes 5 of them to manage it today. Now we only have two heirs that are in on running it. Two, you know what I mean? If you hire management stuff, you better hire the best in the country. You know, Marty's are known for Birds Love It or whatever, the bird feed business. I'd hate to guess how many semi-loads they ship out a day. That takes one person, one owner to be on top of it. Having 1,300 milk cows, not even counting the heifers and calves. I remember when we was milking 75 cows and running the seed business. I look back and I think, how did we do it? But no, you're right, Joe. These articles you read about agriculture in the Midwest, we gotta do something. We gotta stop the Chinese coming in and buying up all this. I just don't understand. I don't blame a guy that they come in and I just read a successful farmer. Can you imagine farms, 200 acres, bringing 20,000 an acre? Yeah. You take Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Wow. When somebody, look at Minot, North Dakota. That's the home base for the B-52s. And who bought up a bunch of farms around that base? The Chinese. Yeah, some farmers renting it. Frank, I hope I answered the question. I tried, but the five largest operations in Springfield Township today, I bet there will only be 2 of those 5 in operation in 10 years.
You know, who else is buying a lot of that farmland? It's Bill Gates.
Yeah, Bill, he kind of got himself in a little jam there right now. He may be having some auctions. Any other questions? Yes, Mary?
Can I pencil you in for July next year? I'm gonna talk about the Kohler farm.
Let's talk about that after the first of the year. Give me a break. I'm gonna have to get that lady in front of you there. She's gonna have to help me on some of the history of it. Well, I've enjoyed doing, yeah, Larry.
What about the grinder farm on 170? What do you know about that?
The hay should be mowed tomorrow. This hasn't been the best year for the Kohlers making hay, but we've made a lot, but, yeah, we've got three. Jimmy and Mary?
I know they never, but what about Mary's dad? Did he have cows way back?
He had a few. I can't ever remember of the grinders having cows, but I know they had cows. He didn't, if he did, he didn't milk more than 10 or 12, so.
Okay, well, thanks, Lee.